much to the conference organizers for having me here today. It's been a really great session so far. As this lovely introduction just said, my name is Nicole Holliday. I'm a doctoral student at Ludwig Maximilian University here in Munich, Germany. Today I want to talk to you about one of our projects in this Food Samsa project, where we were looking at the drivers and levers of the double burden of malnutrition in Cape Town using group model building. So I'd like to move forward. So just to give a little background for those that aren't familiar, South Africa is experiencing a crisis of the double burden of malnutrition, which means the interaction and existence of both undernutrition, so food insecurity and hunger, underweight, stunting, wasting, as well as micronutrient deficiencies, and then combined with overnutrition, such as obesity and overweight, and diet-related non-communicable diseases. So you can see there's a lot of statistics here on the screen, which is basically telling you that food insecurity is a major problem in South Africa and particularly in Cape Town and the surrounding townships. We still see persistently high levels of childhood stunting that have been about the same for the last 20 years. And then increasing rates of overweight and obesity among both children and adults with these related diet-related non-communicable diseases like diabetes. And so the double burden of malnutrition is a complex system, not only physiologically in the human body, but also as a result of the complexity of the food system and food environment. So I wanted to show you kind of this brief overview. This is a new graphic that's designed by the Agriculture, Nutrition, Health Academy Food Environment Working Group. It was just published this year. And this gives you an idea of the interaction of the wider food system with the food environment and then individual dietary behavior and choice. So I don't want to get too much into this, but you can see on the external domain of the food environment, this basically is how people access the food. So this is talking about food price. Is food available? What is the marketing of food telling people? And then the actual property of the food itself, so food quality and safety. And then we have the personal domain, which is more relational to the individual. So things like affordability. Is it convenient for them? Can they buy the foods outside of their, or is it available when they're not working? Can they go shopping outside of their working hours? Do they have transit they can take to access the food? And is the food desirable? Do they know how to cook? Do they have this food literacy? So as you can see, there's a lot of factors that are influencing dietary choice and dietary behavior, which influences overall our nutrition and health outcomes. So what we were doing in our work was trying to use systems thinking to examine what have been the dominant systemic drivers of the double burden of malnutrition at the micro and meso level in Cape Town in the last 30 years. And I'll talk about what micro and meso means. And then what are the potential points to intervene in the current system to reduce this double burden? So this was a qualitative approach using systems thinking and group model building. So we first conducted individual interviews with our micro and meso level stakeholders. We then analyzed this within the team and developed our own code book. Then we used the information from these interviews to prepare an interrelationship diagram and a seed model, which we then used in our group model building workshops with two different groups of stakeholders. So from our qualitative interviews, as I said, we had a micro level. For this, we ended up with 21 interviews. This was with community health workers and coordinators in 3 different townships in the Cape Town metro area. So this was Yanga, Guguletu, and Kensington. This work was conducted mostly last year in 2020, almost 2 years ago, crazy, in 2024. And at the meso level, we had 14 participants. This was researchers with backgrounds in urban planning, nutrition, food policy, and then employees of the City of Cape Town and the Western Cape government, and civil society representatives, and then community health worker administrators. And the micro level perspective was something we were trying to understand more of the lived experience at an individual household and community level. So the community health workers were representing both their perspective as an individual, but also of the families that they work with in the communities. And then the meso level was more of an observer perspective, trying to understand community and local policy. So not reaching quite national level policy, but the regional and city level. So as this is System Dynamics Conference, most of you are probably familiar with this nice mess on the screen. This was our preparation to make our interrelationship diagram. Yeah, just kind of the overview of what we were doing here, of pulling out from the interviews the main themes, and then trying to draw the directional relationships. And then we hosted 2 different group model building workshops. So the first was in person. We had 13 participants, and this was our community health workers, as well as a volunteer from the Western Cape on Wellness, which is a group of people from the government that are also promoting community health and nutrition. And we had a 2-day in-person workshop. And then at the meso level, we had 8 participants in our first session, and this was an online function. So in the bottom picture, you can see we adapted group model building exercises for, oh gosh, I'm just blanking on the name for this online website. I don't know, I can't remember the name right now, but yeah, we did this online. And here's just a quick overview of the scripts that we use. So we did some rich pictures, variable refinement, graphs over time, and then we presented our relationship diagram and our seed models, and then the participants further developed based on the seed model and our variable list, creating their own causal loop diagrams. And then the last workshops and the last parts of the day, we talked about places to intervene using our models. So this, I know, is very small, but just want to give you the broad overview of what our model looks like at this stage. And I would ask, I don't assume you are, but I would ask that you wouldn't take photos as this hasn't been published yet, so we're still refining it. But yes, this is our overview of our the drivers of the double burden of malnutrition at a meso and micro level. So the meso level variables as the top half, and the bottom half are the micro level. And I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. This is the meso level, and you can see we also have color coordinated of the kind of topics or themes of the model. So in the orange, you see, for instance, these commercial determinants of health. This is things such as private sector power and food marketing. We also have pink, which is the policy development process. This was obviously very important when we were talking about at the regional and city level what can be done to address the double burden of malnutrition. And then governance principles, which is less about policy and more about the actual functioning of good governance for nutrition. And then the yellow is food environment domains. So this is things reflecting back
Nicole,
on that image
minutes?
we saw. Oh,
sorry, I just want to tell you that you have 5 minutes. Sorry.
5 minutes. Yeah, perfect. Things such as affordability and accessibility. And then social and equity awareness is this kind of turquoise color. This is talking about social vulnerability and maternal protection policies such as breastfeeding support. And then the blue was access to resources, things such as water and sanitation, household income, and resource allocation. And then this is the micro level. You can see it's a little bit smaller, not as many categories overall, but we did have a couple different sub-themes, such as barriers to food security. So in the townships, we heard a lot about the detriment of crime and substance use to good nutrition. And we also heard more about the importance of relationships, such as trust with spaza shop and informal street food vendors, and then relationships with community health workers. But then you see, again, this access to resources and food environment domains were the most prominent categories. Then I want to skip ahead, because being reflective of the time, to some of our leverage points. So at the micro level, we heard from our participants that they would like more advocacy with their ward counselors, so their local government, on alcohol policy, such as the times that liquor vendors can operate. They also would like to advocate for greater access to land for home and community gardens to have more subsistence gardening, as well as increasing the frequency of health inspections at informal food shops, because we heard a lot about concerns of food safety from informal food vendors. Also strengthening neighborhood street watch programs and supporting food nutrition literacy training for the community health workers. At the meso level, we had about 13 different leverage points, so I'm not going to get into all of them, but I will tell you the overall categories that they were in. So one was about supporting evidence uptake and agenda setting. Also working with civil society, mobilizing civil society, developing structures for an enabling food environment. This was really talking about developing infrastructure like water, sanitation, hygiene for informal food vendors, and also looking at the land usage and land permitting for food gardens, and also zoning regulations. Then increasing transparency of the influence of the corporate sector. This is getting back to, as you saw on the model, the commercial determinants of health. And then regulating food marketing, because we know this is very important for early childhood nutrition, which we also know leads to lifelong nutrition. So that was sort of the whistle-stop whirlwind tour of our work here on the drivers of the double burden of malnutrition. We do have one study where we published already the findings from just the qualitative interviews. So I will post the link to that publication as well in the chat, or you can scan it here. And yeah, this work of Food SEMSA is still ongoing, and I'd be very happy to take your questions or hear any of your feedback. Thanks very much.